Hello and welcome to this video, and on this video I'm going to be going through 10 great albums which are ruined by one awful track. A key track that just pulls it down. There's certain albums out there that have one great song on there, and we have to go and buy those albums, don't they? Because it's got that one great song. And without that one great song, the album wouldn't be that good. It only exists for that one great song. Well, the inverse is also true. You could also have a good album, or in some cases, an album that would be a classic if it wasn't ruined for this one awful song. And in some cases, there are albums that are seen as classics where people want to gloss over that one track and nobody mentions it. So it's quite an interesting thing to do. Now, I have to be honest, when I started to look into this, there were a few straight off, I thought, oh, I hate that track, I hate that track. And then I realised, most bands that are good enough to make a great album are not going to make the mistake of creating a truly awful track. But there's a lot of boring tracks out there. And boring tracks is a different thing. But this is where, for some reason, the band has missed the mark. And I'm going to try and explain why I think they've missed the mark. Sometimes it won't take much explanation. Sometimes it will take a lot. Right, so should we just go straight in on this list? So I'm going to start on home territory. There's a little bit of a thing going on at the moment in the comments where, this channel was set up to talk about jazz rock fusion, prog, a little bit of jazz, a little bit of classic rock. And the core audience come here to hear me chat about John McLaughlin and Weather Report and Yes and King Crimson. That's what they come here for. But because the channel's getting bigger, we now get people who don't necessarily like that music, and they're going, oh, Andy's going to pick some jazz fusion albums on here. And in this case, I've tried not to because of these comments I've got through. But I thought I'd start off with a good, solid, awful jazz rock tune. I could have filled it up with these because at a certain point in time, many jazz rock musicians, probably under the pressure to have a hit record from the record company, decide to sing. Now, if you're Patrice Rushen, you pull it off. If you're Narada Michael Walden, you pull it off. And they actually made some incredible pop songs, even though they were virtuoso jazz rock fusion musicians. But other musicians, it's a bit like this. Stanley Clarke, baby. Should he really be singing? Al Di Meola, should he really be singing on anything, And this is true of John McLaughlin. John McLaughlin's one person that shouldn't be singing on his records. Now, I don't know whether he ever has sung on his records. I know he every now and then he would say, "Are you the one?" He's done that a few times. And he's chanted a few things, like "A Love Supreme." But there is one track that I think ruins what should be a classic album. Towards the end of the 70s, after McLaughlin had folded the Mavish Orchestra, had gone through his acoustic phase with Shakti, he returned to the electric guitar. And he made two albums. One was called Electric Guitarist, absolute classic. And the follow-up to that was called Electric Dreams. And it was by a band called the One Truth Band. Now, I think that this band was equal to the Mavish Orchestra. It had Tony Smith on drums, Fernando Saunders on bass, Stu Goldberg on keyboard, and El Shankar on violin. So it's the same lineup as the Mavish Orchestra. And watching the videos of the band at that time, it was incredibly fiery. When they went into the studio, they didn't quite capture that. But they did capture something that was quite special. Electric Dreams is a fantastic album. If you go back to my interview with Dominic Miller, he states that this album by John McLaughlin, is inspiring his songwriting with Sting. So this album has inspired some of the biggest hit records in the history of modern popular music. And there's some incredible tracks. Side one is faultless. It explores a reworked vision of jazz fusion for the 1980s, And on the track Miles Davis, he actually foresees the sound that Miles Davis is going to have in the 1980s. It's quite interesting. When you flip over onto side two, you've got the incredible The Dark Prince, where McLaughlin really shows his chops. You also have The Unknown Dissident with David Sanborn, a beautiful tune. But side two opens up with an absolute abomination in John McLaughlin's catalogue. And it's a tune called Love and Understanding. Now, Love and Understanding starts off with a drone, and El Shankar's sort of Shakti-esque violin comes in, and it's all great. And then it goes into what sounds like a sort of, like a pop ballad. and the singing starts. Now, the pop ballad is truly awful. It's made terribly awful because John McLaughlin must have written the lyrics. So the lyrics are just sort of love and understanding, understanding love. Love is understanding, understanding love. It's just this sort of thing Cod comes in. But the vocal is so weak that I can only assume it's John McLaughlin singing. Now, when I bought this album as a youngster, I had no credits on it. So I've never known who's on this album. I can tell David Sanborn's on the last track on there, and I can tell the other musicians are on there, but there's a female singer on there. I haven't got a clue who this is. And she also shares the vocal. Once this is out of the way, it then launches into probably the most Mahavishnu part of this album, where you get this great sort of dual sort of melody of guitar, distorted guitar, and Al Shanker's violin. It's great. So this track has the potential. The 2/3 of it is fantastic, but it's absolutely ruined by this one song. And it sort of takes up that second part of the album, destroys the momentum on there. And I think it's followed up by some sort of sound effectsy thing, and it just unsettles the album. Now, you could try and ignore it, but I can't, because this, for me, is one of the lowest points in John McLaughlin's whole catalogue of brilliance. In fact, is there a worse moment in his catalogue than that vocal coming in, going, love and understanding, understanding love. Love is understanding. Now, if you think this is quite good, go and check it out. You probably quite like it, but I hate it. Understanding love. That's bad enough. And then it goes. And then there's like big Beatles build up, which builds up, and all this atonal, weird electronic stuff's coming. Now, he's thrown a spanner in the works on this song, but I don't think it works. I hate it. And then it just stops and it goes, bow, 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 and it kicks into a cool bit. It ruined it with the bit before, John. What were you doing? Ruined one of your best albums. Because, of course, at this point, that's the last album he did with CBS, Columbia. He then moves over to, I think, to Warner Brothers, and it all changes, and we never see the darkness again. We never see the Mahavishnu darkness ever again. John McLaughlin does something for the next 40 years. He does something else. Great as it is, this is the last time he had that darkness that was so apparent in the 70s Mahavishnu. I've done a whole video on this. Anyway, I'm going to move on now. Let's just start it off as we've gone. Got the fusion out of the way. If you don't know who John McLaughlin is, you just sat through that bit. Go and check it out. Electric Dreams. Go and check it out. Tell me what you think. Right. At number 9, and these are ranked, I have one of the greatest albums ever made. Perhaps, yes, his greatest album. Now, on here, I'll often say Close to the Edge is their greatest album, and I have a very soft spot for Relayer, which is an incredible album, but just not quite, yes, that's more like jazz fusion, yes, isn't it, that one? And then I love Going for the One as well. What an incredible album. I think side 2 of Going for the One with Wondrous Stories and Awaken is perhaps the greatest side in progressive rock history. Okay? But if I was going to pick one album to take away on a desert island to represent, yes, at their greatest and finest, it would be Fragile. Fragile's their greatest album, but the problem with Fragile, it's full of all these little rubbish tracks, isn't it? We all know it. It's full of rubbish little tracks. So I went back and listened to it, and I thought, which ones do I hate out of here? Well, there's Bill Bruford's little fiddly, non-tune that lasts for about a minute. You know, that one that comes in. I've got no problem with that. John Anderson's we are heaven. All that. I love that. Mood for a Day. Brilliant. Steve Howe did his little acoustic thing on Yes, I haven't got no problem with that. A little acoustic interludes by Steve Howe's always welcome. Fish. The Fish, with all that bass played on it, it's brilliant. So they're all quite good, aren't they? The weakest would probably be Bill Bruford's. If you took Bruford's and they just stuck it in the middle of one of their instrumental sections, so that would be cool. Then stick it in it'll go in the Heart of the Sunrise. So stick it into there, right? Move it around a little bit. start off with We Are Heaven instead of Roundabout, and end with it, because you know it ends with it. So that bookends, it gets a better structure. Everything else is fine, except for Rick Wakeman's input, which is a tune called Cans and Brahms, where he plays a Brahms piece on all different organs. Now, I know as I say this, proggers out there are going to go, oh, I love that, Andy. I really like that. Well, you can't criticise Brahms. Brahms is great. He's a good composer. But for me, at the time, it's obviously a wonderful thing, because he went in with all his keyboards. Rick brought all his keyboards in. He sets them all up, and they've got their 8-track, or even maybe 16-track at this point, and he stitches together this sort of keyboard classical version of this tune. But now, it just sounds like a really bad keyboard demo. It's so cheesy and awful. And I don't think it could have been repurposed or put in anywhere. I think the thing that brings this down, and it's early on in the album sort of voyage, you know, because it opens up with Roundabout, and Roundabout is like, that's Yes at their best. It's Yes at their, I mean, for most people, that's the track, isn't it? That defines Yes as a prog band. South Side of the Sky is just absolutely epic and brilliant. In the Heart of the Sunrise, those three are brilliant. I don't think the sequencing's right either as well. I love Long Distance Run Around into the Fish or whatever it's called. Brilliant. That's all brilliant. So those two seem to work together to me. And then you've got these, you know, you've got the John Anderson thing. It's Cans and Brahms. If you get rid of that altogether, I think we would be saying that this is the greatest Yes album ever made. I honestly do. If you got rid of Cans and Brahms and put it on some other, you know, album of like they go through the vaults, you know, it's an interesting thing to. But it pulls this album down, and the reason is because Rick Wakeman, he gets into the Yes, and he can't wait to do this, can he? He goes, oh, I'm on Yes now. What shall I do? I'm going to do some classical stuff. And you know, and there's a cheesiness to Rick Wakeman that he managed to pull in later on. And then he brought it out full tilt when he started having his awful solo career. Anyway, I'm not going to knock Rick too much, because I do love him. So let's have a look at number 8. At number 8, I have, off Highway to Hell, the track Love Hungry Man. I spoke about this when I talked about perfect albums, because Highway to Hell is one of the most perfect albums. Every single track on that is absolutely brilliant, except for this Love Hungry Man. And I have, for some reason, when I did the last video, I said it was the second track on the album, but it's not. That's I've been around the world. What's that one called? I've seen a million girls. Brilliant. I ain't one of them guys. But my baby. I can't remember. Girl Gone Bad. That's Van Halen. Girl Can't Help It. Now that's that 950 film. It's something like that. That's a brilliant track. This is second to last. And I've got to be honest, I love this album, and I think I've glossed over it. It was only when I was doing the research that people said, oh, this track's awful. Even the band don't like Love Hungry Man. And I thought, I can't remember it. And so I put it on, and I think on the sequencing that I saw on the internet, it was on the second one I came across. So for some reason, I thought it was the second one, which is silly, because I really thought about it. I know this album really well. Anyway, that's by the by. And I put it on, and what it is, it's whatever magical thing Led Zeppelin do, or AC/DC, or Led Zeppelin. Don't worry, they're on the list as well. Don't we're going to get to them. Whatever magical thing AC/DC do, they don't do it on this track. It's just limp. And then it's made worse by Cliff Williams' disco bass line. So Cliff's a quiet member of the band, isn't it? And he's probably sat there thinking, I get a bit fed up and just go dum, 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 through everything, you know. Or through, oh, give me something more to do. And he's obviously checking out, and he hasn't told the rest of the band, but he's checking out Chic, isn't he? He's listening to Bernard Edwards. And he puts a bit of Chic Bernard Edwards on the bass, and I'm actually impressed by it, that you hear him really doing this cool bass line, but it doesn't lift the track up, right? It's not terrible. It's not like Love and Understanding by John McLaughlin. Come on. Sorry, my computer switched off then. This isn't going well at the moment. There's a lot of things going on. I'm freezing cold. So this is why I'm stood up, because I've actually got a fanny in between my legs blowing straight up. Don't worry, I'm past the point where I need to worry about my fertility, if you know what I'm saying. But it's freezing cold, and I'm getting too hot and too cold, and because I'm standing up and moving around, it's not going right, and my computer's, I can't keep, I don't know, shall I start again? 15 minutes in? You don't mind, do you? This one's a little bit unfocused, so I'll get into it in a minute. I'll get into it a bit edgy. So that's why we've got number 8, Love Hungry Man. I think that I talked about that one the other day. Right, okay, so Pink Floyd. There are so many rubbish tracks to pick from with Pink Floyd, right? Pink Floyd, after Syd Barrett leaves, are pretty directionless for the next 5 or 6 albums. They haven't got a proper frontman, they haven't got a proper songwriter, or they're all having a go. They don't really know what to do. And I've said recently on another video, because they're good, solid English gentlemen, they know how to run a business, so they keep the thing going. You know, they know how to do the books and keep the band going, but there's not much going on really. And they sort of find their sound after Syd Barrett's gone, probably on Medal. Side 2 of Medal, Echoes, is pure genius. It is probably Pink Floyd's finest hour. That one track on its own, for me, trumps even Dark Side of the Moon. It's absolutely brilliant. But side 1's a bit rubbish. That track that it opens up with at the stop, that nigga, I forgot what it's called. That's a brilliant instrumental that opens it up. Not careful with that, Axel Eugene. What's it called? See, I'm not a huge Pink Floyd fan, but I do love that tune. But then the rest of side 1 is pretty poor. It's just boring and dull. And it ends up with that track called Seamus, which is where they decided to fill an album up because they had no ideas by playing a blues and getting their mate's dog called Seamus to sing on it. Got any ideas for the album? No. They don't talk like that, do they? Oh, have you got any ideas for this album? I mean, Echoes is pretty good. I mean, when you look at the making of Echoes, they basically go to the studio with no ideas whatsoever. And they're doing stuff like, they're putting something down and then getting the rest of the band to come in and put their parts down without listening. They're just hoping that randomly they come across something quite good, which they do, which is a testament to randomness, and I believe in randomness. But when they do try and sit down and write a song, which they do on this album, they come out with the second to last track on side 1, which is way worse than Seamus, and it's called Saint-Tropez. And it's like this cod jazz pastiche, and it's boring, it's silly, and it's also not very good. I know Richard Wright was the jazz guy. Maybe he'd got some 7th chords, maybe 7 chords in there, and he thought, I've come up with this thing. But they just don't pull it off. It's truly awful. And so I feel, again, if you took that off and Seamus off and could get one extra track to replace those 2 others that's a bit longer, anything would have done. At that point, we would be talking about Pink Floyd's greatest album, or at least a rival to Dark Side of the Moon. You see how this video works? It's like, what if you got rid of that track and put something good in its place? How does that affect the overall thing? That's what we're talking about here. And I actually really love Echoes. I think it's absolutely brilliant. Absolutely brilliant. But I do feel that the version on Live at Pompeii is better. It is, isn't it? Pink Floyd, they're bloody... When they're good, they're bloody good, but when they're not, they're not. They're so up and down, and the Pink Floyd fans won't have it, They won't have it. Because they'll sit there and love anything. They're going to say that side 1 of Medal's absolutely brilliant. It's one of their favourite bits of Pink Floyd. They're lying. They're just lying. But let them lie. So that was at number 7, was Saint-Tropez by Pink Floyd off Medal. I feel a little bit back into it now. Started off a little bit jumpy. Right, so what have we got at number 6? Queen. Right? Never talk about Queen much on the channel. I do really like Queen. A lot of the proggers love those early albums, Queen 1 and Queen 2, Sheer Heart Attack. I love the period that comes in after that, Night at the Opera, Day at the Races, and then they move to jazz. Jazz, this sort of weird, camp, hyper studio-based richness of vocal harmonies and masked guitars with a heavy rocking Led Zeppelin thing, all in the service of this really strange songwriting approach, which is all about artifice. The Queen writes songs where you don't feel that Freddie Mercury is going into his soul. He may be going into his soul, but he's doing it in a way which is so abstract and weird. This is one of their most famous songs. It really goes... Scaramouche, could you do the fandango? Thunderbolts and lightning, very, very frightening me. That's the sort of lyrics we've got, and I think it's wonderful. And for me, the mid to late 70s Queen is genius. When they get in the 80s, they just go rubbish, don't they? Let's be frank. They have a whole ton of hit records, but they do go a bit rubbish in the 1980s, right? And it's odd because Hot Space, which is sort of their disco album, I quite like. I'm going to switch the heat off again. Can't regulate this. Hot Space is all right. It's the kind of magic which is massively successful. I can't stand it. It's like really horrible. What people criticise Hot Space for, you know, and they say there's only one good track on it. It's the same thing with It's the Kind of Magic. There's only one good track on that. Is it One Vision or something? I can't remember. No expert on Queen in the 1980s because the first album and only album I ever bought by Queen, I bought in 1980 when I first got into rock music. I was 12 years old and I was buying all the rock, you know, Rainbow, White Snake. And I thought I'd go and buy a Queen album. So I did, and it was The Game. And I can remember putting this album at home and I put side one on and I thought it was one of the greatest albums I'd heard. 12 years old, hearing that. Right, here in The Game start, what an incredible piece of songwriting. It does all the sort of, it's a type of aggressive rock that only Queen do, because it's really accessible, but it is full on progressive rock. Musically, it's an incredible thing. And then I think you got like, was it Dragon Attack? And then just rock hard on Dragon Attack. It's so cool and electric. And then you get, Another One Bites the Dust, don't you? Which is them doing disco better than any disco band ever. I think there's another track at the end of that side one. But by then I'm sold. We've had, what else is on side one? See, I don't do research on these, as you know, and it's like, as I'm getting older, I'm especially when I'm trying to pull stuff about bands that aren't in my centre knowledge, which is what Queen is. But my point is, side one is one of the greatest sides in Queen's history. All those tracks are great. Side two's not so good, is it? Side two's not so good, you know, sort of few rockers on there, but there's nothing to offend on there except for one track. And then when you get to the end, you've got Save Me, which again is prime Queen, absolutely brilliant. But there's a track on there, right? And I'm gonna have to watch this because on YouTube, if you talk about this, you get, I talked about this subject matter once, and then they put warnings all over my YouTube, so I'm going to have to use a euphemism. So there's a track on there that's called, I'll just mention it, hopefully I'll get away with it. It's called Suicide Solution. And this is a crap song, which has a sort of music hall, sort of bouncy, with the very chirpy message of don't try to worth it, so don't try to. Now, it's a crap song. If it had a different set of lyrics, we could have glossed over it. But this is truly awful, right? And it brings down a weak side. This album's nearly there as being one of Queen's great albums. Side one's great. Save Me is great. They got 2 or 3 tracks, which are okay. You could live with those. They're not bad. But this one on side 2, and I remember when I first heard the album as a kid, side 1 blew me away. And from that point, I thought, I would have said for many years, oh, their best album's The Game. And it's only because it was the first one I heard, and I loved that side 1. Crazy Little Thing Called Love, that's the other classic on there, which is, you know, I hate rock and roll pastiches. I knew there was another brilliant track. This is the greatest rock and roll pastiche ever. They get Led Zeppelin rock and roll, right? It's all shoo-waddy-waddy. It's all shoo-waddy-waddy. The only band ever able to do a rock and roll pastiche brilliantly was Queen. And the reason is because they don't fall into doing all the 3-chord tricks. They do all their Queen trickery. That composition is all over the place. And yet it's all done with this sort of generic style of proper rock and roll. And Brian May, what a great guitarist. You listen to that sort of Scotty Moore-esque guitar solo on Crazy. So side 1 is just absolutely brilliant. What does side 2 open with? It's pretty strong what side 2 opens with. And then you get a couple of rubbish, Suicide Solution and Save Me. So you can see, my point is, when you got an album this good, with a track this rubbish, a Suicide Solution, we picture this as being a bit rubbish, don't we? They ruin the album. So that's why I've got number 6 is Don't Try Suicide. off the album The Game by Queen. And I've said suicide too many times. I've just bloody said it again. Ugh, they don't like you talking about it. Right, King Crimson. See, what I did is that the way I did this list, I thought, what are my favourite bands? I wrote my favourite bands down. I didn't put Queen down, they're not one of my favourite bands, but I do like them. But certain people, like John McLaughlin, King Crimson, Frank Zappa, and I looked at them and I thought, is there any tracks I really hate? Now, King Crimson is one of my favourite bands. They're right in the top 10, if not the top 5. But there's one album that I hate. Right, so before we get onto the track, this is King Crimson to me. They invent progressive rock within the court of the Crimson King. And it's a great album, but it's a bit patchy. I've always thought it's a bit patchy. Nothing bad, a bit meandery, a bit noodly, a bit hippie, like Away with the Fairies. But when there's got that brutal proto-heavy metal or the Mellotron pomp, brilliant. Next album, In the Wake of Poseidon, same lineup, but it's fallen apart. And they sort of just they do the same thing again. But it has Cat Food on. And Cat Food is quite a funky track, and it opens up another area of King Crimson that we don't really hear ever again. And I love Cat Food. Cat Food elevates that album. Then we get a couple of albums, Lizard and Islands. Now, Lizard is okay, but it's a bit noodly jazz-influenced prog, which I'm not too keen on, to be honest. You'd think me being a jazz fan, I'd like that stuff, but I'm not really, because I never feel like the soloing's that strong, but that's another story. And Islands, which sort of does the same thing. Now, Islands is brought down by the track Ladies of the Road. Now, the thing is, musically, Ladies of the Road is the best thing on Islands, as far as I'm concerned. They're exploring this funky line that they do on Cat Food, but they never quite do it again. Fripp's guitar's interesting. They then exploit on Easy Money. But Peter Sinfield's lyrics, now they got Peter Sinfield, they got a lyricist. They haven't got to worry about writing lyrics. They've got a bloke that's a professional that writes the lyrics. Those lyrics I find offensive, you know. I'm not one for political correctness, you know that. I'm not one for that. But they are so sexist, and I'm sure someone's going to come out and say it's ironic or there's some reason why they put it out there. But the thought, I don't know what it is. If Led Zeppelin want to sing about groupies, I can stomach that. But the idea of Fripp, and especially Peter Sinfield writing this, because he's obviously ligging it around with the band. He's getting a bit of groupie interest, you know, and he decides to write a song about it. Saying, mate, you're not even in the band, you're just writing the lyrics, just hanging around with them, and they don't know what you do in there. You know, I hate that. It's just sexist nonsense. It's like one of the worst examples of dodgy, you know, decadent rock music. That's what I have. I hate it. And Islands, I can't even think of anything else on that album. The rest of it's just new, sort of noodly King Crimson that they were doing in there until, you know, Fripp decided to change the rules and plug the guitar in and start playing some heavy riffs and scaring the pants off everybody, which he does on Larks, Tongues and Aspic, a proper prog album. Ruins Islands. Maybe Islands would be, maybe if that was a good track, maybe if they just kept it as an instrumental or had some decent vocal on there. Because I don't like the way the bloke sings it either. It's creepy. Islands, Ladies of the Road, hate it. Right. This is a strange one. At number 4, because that was number 5, at number 4, let's have a look at Rush. Because with Rush, there's so many crap songs to choose from. Now, I love Rush. You know I love Rush, right? I absolutely love Rush. They're one of my favourite bands. Their fan base, it's a bit like the Warnings fan base. You can't criticise Rush because the Rush fans will come in. They hold a special place. And I think that's because the band were around for so long and people identified with Geddy Lee, Alex Lifeson, Neil Peart, who all had their own personalities, strong personalities, but they all seemed like nice guys. They all got on with each other, surprisingly. There was never any internal sort of you know, falling out with each other, and you start to see that they all balance each other. You know, you've got the quiet sort of intellectualism of Neil Peart, and you've got the sort of wacky, sort of surrealist mind of Alex Lifeson, and then you've got the rock solid Geddy Lee in the middle, you know, and sort of as a mediator for these two. And I think that makes you feel very affectionate to the band. And I do feel very affectionate to them. But my God, have they done a whole ton of cruddy songs. Starting probably with I Think I'm Going Bald. I mean, why would you want to do that? But that's not what I'm going to go for here. You'd be surprised what I'm going to go for. And when you get to the 80s, my God, there's so many awful tracks there. But I thought what I get all the time is people go, Andy, you said Moving Pictures was their greatest album. I think that album's near perfect. Don't think there isn't a bad track on there. There isn't even an average track. Every single track on that, every single one is one of Rush's best tracks. The only one that you might question would be Vital Signs, but I feel that the experimental with 80s aesthetic on Vital Signs is greater than anything they did after that. That was their finest moment. I think so they went for it, and I love it. Witch Hunt, Camera Eye, YYZ, Red Barchetta, Limelight, Tom Sawyer. These are just the greatest tracks ever. But people push against that, and it is what it is because that album's a little bit poppy compared to their big prog albums. 2112, yeah, put that aside. But the proggers, they love Farewell to Kings, Hemispheres, and Permanent Waves. They love those albums, especially Hemispheres and Permanent Waves. So this one guy came on the other day, and he said to me, you've just gone through the 10 greatest perfect albums, the most perfect albums of all time, and you haven't put Hemispheres on. I said, because it's not perfect. He said, what do you mean? I said, well, Hemispheres are epic, a sideline epic. It does go on. It does, doesn't it? It's like, every time I put it on, it's really cool, but it just goes on, and I'm saying, is that, I can't even remember, is that the one? It just goes on. And it's like, when it finishes, I'm like, oh, is it finished now? It's incredible playing. The meticulousness which they put it together, and they're obviously playing it all at the same time over in Rockfield, it's incredible. But that goes on. The Trees is perfect. The Trees is like a track that you get on Moving Pictures. You understand what I'm saying? The Trees is absolutely perfect. La Villa Stranziata is a good instrumental, but they don't pull off what they put, because rock instrumentals are difficult, and Rush are actually very good at them. La Villa Strangiata has a few silly comedy moments in. Maybe, that's fine. But I do, when I was a kid, I loved that track. Circumstances, though, that's throwaway. It's not a bad track. It's not a bad track. It's just not quite at the same levels. No one's going to say, oh, what's your favourite Rush song? Oh, it's Circumstances. They're never going to say that. All right? But when we go to Farewell to Kings, this is full of just genius Rush. The title track, Farewell to Kings. Xanadu, absolutely incredible. Close to the heart, shows that you can write a pop song which is prog. It's all brilliant. But there's that track no one talks about, Madrigal, right? And for me, I think, well, there's just a throwaway track on there, isn't it? It's not. Go and listen to it. It's awful. It's proper Away with the Fairies. The arrangement's horrible because Geddy Lee's playing the bass. There's no drums on it, and it's just this awful sort of the worst aspects of prog that you could ever do. There's no great tune there. It's I think it's so poor compared to the rest of the album, but it vies for the middle of Cygnus X1, because when I listen to it, I listen to Madrigal, I think it's absolutely forgettable, badly arranged, badly thought out, pixie prog. That's what we've got here. It hasn't got the bite, it hasn't got the energy, and they're not able to go away and write something airy-fairy like Yes could, or maybe a Jethro Tull. They haven't got that sort of ability. They're basically a Led Zepp style rock band with tricky bits, so they can't really pull that off. And I thought, yeah, that's pretty awful. And it does ruin this. And I remember thinking when I was a kid and I thought that Farewell to Kings was the greatest album ever made, that I would just always skip past that track. It precedes Cygnus X1. Now, Cygnus X1 is one of the finest moments of Rush. That start at the beginning with all the electronic effects, and it's suddenly, you've had the sort of, Pixies in the Forest prog that they've been exploring on the previous albums. But on Cygnus X1, they go, well, there's this dystopian prog as well. This dystopian science fiction prog. And they're going to do that on Hemispheres. And they are going to create the basic genre for all progressive metal. They're going to say, you're not going to be singing about wizards and all that stuff. What you're going to be singing about is dystopian landscapes, post-apocalyptic, people walking around, as zombies. That's what progressive metal's going to do. And they do it on Cygnus X1. And Cygnus X1 is like, it's about a people in a spaceship called the Rocinante, which I think is that the horse of Don Quixote? It's some literary reference that makes Neil Peart feel like he's a clever man. And he is a clever man. And they fly into a black hole. I mean, what a title. Now, the opening is some of the best Rush ever. And the reason is because it just gets trippy and weird. Bow, bow, ba-da-dow. Bow, bow, ba-da-bow, bow. It's brilliant. I love that bit. Love that bit. And at the end, when it just goes into this majestically tight, like robotic, they really are spelling out progressive metal at the end of Sing the Sex One. But the middle bit sounds like a really bad school musical. I could see the awful fake background to their theatre play that they're putting on about some people going into it. It's just truly, listen to the middle bit. I can't listen to it without being embarrassed. I want to sing it to you, but I can't because my brain has obscured how awful it is. The middle bit of Sing the Sex One is truly awful. It's worse than the bit in 2112 when he finds the guitar in the cave, which I find really, 2112 is incredible, but it's ruined. That album is ruined for when he finds that guitar in the cave. I hate it. And he's singing it. What is this I've found? It's a guitar that's been buried underground. And then he starts strumming it, picks it up, he can play it straight off because he's a bloody genius. And he was singing a song about it anyway, even though music's been banned. It doesn't make sense, but it's so cheesy. Rush, they want to be prog, but they're Canadian, and Canadians they don't have the literary tradition that we have here in the UK. They don't understand it, and it all goes a bit like a school play when they do. It always does. When it's really cheesy, like By-Tor and the Snow Dog, or the Snowman, as I called it the other day. By-Tor and the Snow Dog is so cheesy, it's great. It's great. Necromancer's great. Sing the Sex One is too good. And so what I'm putting forth here is what ruins number 4, Farewell to Kings, is that madrigal going into that middle section of Sing the Sex One. It ruins that album. Awful. Those bits are awful and truly awful. This is why it's high up on the list. What could be worse than Madrigal? What's a worse tune that really ruins an album? This was nearly number 1. It's at number 3. Benny the Bouncer off Brain Salad Surgery. I respect ELP. ELP make the darkest prog album in history. They get H.R. Giger to design the cover, and they create this track that opens up with the English Jerusalem. A bit cheesy, but it's grandiose. Then it goes into Toccata, and it's the darkest thing. And then we enter into their epic, which is more than a side long. Carnival 9. What a tour de force, right? And let's be honest. ELP's finest moment is Carnival 9. Right? But we're always going to go back to Trilogy or Tarkus to say that's the greatest album. You know why? There's no reason it's the best artwork, the best album. Carnival 9 is incredible. They're at the peak of their powers. Why is nobody saying that Brain Salad Surgery is the best album? Right? It could be Jerusalem, but Jerusalem is always better than I imagined it. I always think, Greg Lake droning on, thinking, in these... But when you actually listen to it, it's very beautifully done because Keith Emerson can arrange and they know what they're bloody doing. They're an incredible band. ELP are an incredible band. Able to pull off things instrumentally that Yes and Genesis just could not pull off. Toccata I can't believe a mainstream album that's selling the millions has got a track that heavy on it. So the only reason why the blight on this genius album is Benny the Bouncer. Now, there's a part of me that respects them for doing it. Because they're cheeky chaps, ELP. They don't take themselves seriously. Everyone thinks they're pretentious, but they're not. It's the Velvet Underground and Joy Division. It's those moody types that stand around thinking they're making great art. ELP never think they're making great art. They are entertaining you with music. They come out and blow you away. They're like magicians and they go, we can do this and we can do that. And they entertain you with music. That's what I love about music. And so why not, in the middle of the darkest progressive rock album ever, write a sort of Cockney-esque Chaz and Dave song with Mrs. Mills piano playing, which is always the Achilles heel of Keith Emerson, about a bouncer. A Cockney... Kate Bush does it, doesn't she? Kate Bush does it on The Dreaming. She comes out, she does that Ealing comedy bit. There goes a tenor. It's the same thing. Kate gets away with it. Why can't ELP? Maybe they do get away with it. But I can't help thinking, why does us proggers not say, oh, Brain Salad Surgery, greatest album by ELP. by a long shot, probably the greatest progressive album of all time. You know, you could go about close to it, but listen to Carnival Night, listen to musically what's going on in there. And it's so incredible. You know, he stands up and goes, "Welcome back, my friends, to the show." Why did the album open up like that? The sequencing's wrong. Should have ended with Jerusalem, should have opened up, had Toccata just before Jerusalem, or actually, couldn't they have put Toccata inside it? Or was that, because, I don't know. And Benny the Bouncer, what they should have done, they should have hidden that at the end of the album. It should have finished and droned off, and you think, oh my God, I'm blown away. That is so heavy and dark. There really was some dark stuff on there. That's like King Crimson Mahavishnu dark. That was really rare. They're dark band, the LP. And then Benny the Bouncer comes in and surprises you. It's in the wrong place. It ruins a great album. I'm telling you now, this is why it's so high up on the list. But higher than that, at number 2, the great Led Zeppelin. Like I said, I wrote down my favourite bands of all time. Led Zeppelin. Did they make any bad songs? Oh, yeah. I mean, bloody Hot Dog for a start, off In Through the Outdoor. But I don't like In Through the Outdoor anyway. You know, I don't like Southbound in Surrey as much. I don't like In the Evening. It's a bit ploddy. Carousel Armbra's pretty good. I like that. All of My Love is great songwriting. A lot of that Zeppelin. That last track is I hate. You know the bit when Robert Plant goes, it's all right, it's very moody, he's got some great guitar playing, and then at one point Robert goes, ah, and just sounds like he's fallen down a lift shaft. Probably emulated a person that probably was thrown down down a lift shaft by the roadies at some sort of gig. Was that Led Zeppelin? Was it Deep Purple? It was Deep Purple, wasn't it? Let's gloss over that, because that's murder, that is. Anyway, I'm not saying anything. But he does emulate being thrown down a lift shaft. What else have we got? Get on to another subject. What's that one with the Purdy shuffle on? It's awful. Fall in the Rain. Awful song, but brilliant drumming. Hot Dog. But it's not that, because the whole album's rubbish. The whole album's rubbish. Presents, they don't put a foot wrong. The Crunge, Jamaica. They're having so much fun on House of the Holy. You don't want to have a go at them. Led Zeppelin 4, amazing. Led Zeppelin 3. Oh, there's a couple on there, that bloody blues thing at the end of Led Zeppelin 3. But it's at the end of the album. And they've blown me away so much by the time you get to that. I mean, Bron Your Stomp as well. If you took the stomp out of it, I quite like that. It's that bloody bass drum in there. But that hats off to Harper. Hey, but it's not offensive. It just sits there and you think, what did they do this for, you know? No. The Troublesome album for me is Physical Graffiti. Their masterpiece, a double album full of incredible music. It's full of incredible music. But for me, it's not quite that incredible. And the reason is because, and I've just done a whole video talking about this, so I don't want to get into this. Some of the tracks are amazing. A lot of the tracks that were made for that album that were written and recorded in 1974 when they were doing the sessions for Physical Graffiti are fantastic. Kashmir, Custard Pie, In My Time of Dying, Trampled Underfoot. These are all incredible tunes in the light, all incredible tunes. But some of the outtakes are outtakes. And for me, I absolutely hate Down by the Seaside. Now, when I look this up on Wikipedia and in a few Led Zeppelin sites, it says this was inspired by Neil Young. Yeah, it sounds it. Because I hate Neil Young. Right? I know people love Neil Young. And if you like Neil Young, you probably like Down by the Seaside. I don't get stuff like that. Right? It's just boring. It's not funny, and it's not heavy. Down by the seaside. It shows the other side of Led Zeppelin, and you don't understand. It's like they're not all just shouting. Yeah, I know, they do that all the time, and I love it since I've been loving you. Incredible, but I don't like this. And then when he goes, it's like a lament. It's like a cheesy lament for somebody who's died. Probably throw down a lift shaft. I'm just going to get out of this territory, I think. Let's move on for this. Because I don't think whoever got thrown down a lift shaft, it wasn't nothing to do with Led Zeppelin. I know that for a case. So I'm not having to go at Led Zeppelin. It's that folklore, isn't it, of what bands got up to in the 70s. You probably think, I've never heard of this, Andy. I didn't even know about it. Probably not true. I'm just probably making it up. Am I making it up? I don't know. We're at number 1 now. Right. The Beatles. I ranked the Beatles album. Took me 2 weeks to do. I listened to every single album in order. I scored it using a very complex system, and then I got all the scores, so I wasn't just going for albums I liked. And surprisingly, It wasn't Revolver. It wasn't Abbey Road. It wasn't Sergeant Pepper. It wasn't the White Album that came out #1. Objectively, when I did the score, it was Abbey Road. Did I just say that? Anyway, when I did it, the one that it is their best album, and people said, "Oh, their best album's like," I said, "No, it's not," because I hadn't really listened to the Beatles until I did this experiment, and when I put it on, it was absolutely amazing. Really brilliant. It's like the Beatles are the greatest band of all time, and they go, "Yeah, I know we're not getting on. We're all fighting. We don't want to be together. We did Let It Be, and Phil Spector ruined that. So let's just get in there and do one album and make it the best album ever." And they do. They write this one album, and so when I listen to it, it is really amazing. This is the Beatles' best album, but we don't say that, do we? Everyone, I said to my mate Rob, who's coming over in a minute, I keep expecting him to walk in at any time. It'd be brilliant if he walked in now, because we could talk to him and say, "What's that? You like the Beatles, don't you?" Yeah. What's their best album? Abbey Road. Really? Not like Revolver. No. Abbey Road's amazing. It is amazing, but it has a huge Achilles heel on. A song that also almost represents awful songs in rock folklore. You know the one I mean, don't you? It's the song that broke the Beatles up. A song of pure evil, a song that should never have been considered. And the rest of the band knew it should never be considered. And they tried for it to not be considered. But Paul McCartney, who was the only person that was trying to keep that band going, was obsessed with this song, wasn't it? Because he'd got this idea. He had this idea of writing a song about some bloke called Maxwell who decides to kill someone by smashing their skull in with a silver hammer. But he's going to write that song in the style of a sort of Cockney musical from the 1960s, a little bit like maybe Oliver or Half a Sixpence. It reminds me of Half a Sixpence, that does. And when you put it on, what it is in reality is when they were recording it, I think John Lennon had gone off. He'd had a car crash or something. And he returns. So he'd had his car crash. He brings Yoko Ono with her because he's got to have Yoko with him all the time, as we know. And she's really been hurt in the crash more than him. So they set this bed up. So imagine you got Yoko Ono is lying in bed in the studio over in the corner. "You're right, Yoko. Yeah. Oh, sorry, get your head down. Yeah, sorry, we're making an album. Yeah. And we will try and be quiet. I know it's a bit noisy. You try and get yourself. I mean, you could have stayed at home if you're not well, couldn't you? But it's fair enough. We spent a load of money having these people bring a double bed in and you're sat over in the corner. You're all right, though? Do you want a cup of tea or anything? Yeah, you're okay then? Yeah. And you're making notes to tell John. Yeah, I know, we're trying our best. Well, I've got this tune, Maxwell Silver Hammer, and I'm going to make... I'm being Paul McCartney. I'm going to make the... I was thinking we should get this one nailed, really. Oh, God, that's terrible, isn't it? I'm not great with voices. I've got the voices I do, but when I try and do an impersonation, I can't do it. Paul McCartney, from about 1967 on, was the only one that really wanted to do the Beatles. The rest of them are all fed up with it. They don't want to do it anymore. Ringo's there. He doesn't know what the hell's going to happen if they stop the band. I don't know what they're going to do. What shall I do? I mean, I could in the future narrate Thomas the Tank Engine, a cartoon. I was thinking that might be something I could do in the future. I can't really do much, can I, except play the drums for the Beatles. Don't worry, we all the way through this, Ringo, we've been setting you up. Every single album you sung the song on. I remember you had that hit record with the Yellow Submarine. Oh, I like that, but I'm sorry, I had a hit record with that. I mean, I think it's possibly the Beatles' best song, don't you think? Well, not maybe, but people liked it, didn't they? Yes, they did. And you did that song When I'm 64. I mean, it's a bit cheesy. I mean, what did John say? John Lennon called it granny music. You do that a little bit, don't you, Paul? Well, I do. Yes, I like to write my granny music. Yes, I like it. Yes, and I think we need to this Maxwell Silver Hammer. I think it's going to be a huge hit record. No, I don't think it is, Paul. I can't keep this up. So this argument's going on. Now, when you read about it, I thought that Paul McCartney had made them work on it for a month. He made them work on it for 3 days. It's not that. I feel sorry for Paul. He's going, I've got a song here. None of you don't want to be here. You brought Yoko. You got your wife stuck in the bed over there. Ringo's at the back ready to go. He's panicking in case the band stops. I'm only keeping it going for Ringo. I'm only keeping the band going for Ringo. What should we do? I mean, I don't know. I mean, he'll be all right for money, but what's he going to do? What's he going to do? Ringo Starr could be in a few films. I'm sure people will help him out. And he's still going down, Ringo. There's only 2 of them left. Poor old George Harrison is gone. John Lennon obviously assassinated in 1980. It's an incredible story, the Beatles. They are the greatest band of all time. Don't care what you say. Not my favourite band, but they are the greatest band. What they achieved is incredible. And when you listen to Maxwell's Silver Hammer, you go, well, this isn't this bad, Andy, for you to put it number one. But the problem is, it's not Obladi Oblada. It's not Yellow Submarine. It's not When I'm 64, because the bad feeling that's there is in that song. And so it's false. It's false. It's out of kilter with the rest of the album. And in the end, the Beatles, the greatest band of all time, they finished with their greatest album of all time. And it is slightly ruined by Maxwell's Silver Hammer. And if Paul, who had the best thing in mind, he was trying to keep that, and he thought this is going to be the big hit record. This is, you know, and the band didn't care anymore. They all wanted to go their separate ways, because this is the thing about bands. I'm going to have to do a whole video on this, because this aspect of a band of having, like, you've got genius musicians coming together, and they form this band and they have chemistry, and even though they're all individual geniuses, they're greater than the sum of their parts. This is the Beatles, without doubt. You know, three of the greatest songwriters of all time. When they sing together, do harmonies, it sounds amazing. When they play together, they're locked in because of spending so much time in Hamburg playing over and over again, and they're just in this incredible band. And when they get together, they're so hungry for it that they just destroy. They destroy on those albums. They're plodding through, and then they become world leaders, and they're sitting there going, oh my God, we're the greatest band of all time. We've changed culture. And they're like this, and they're making the money, and then the money comes in, they buy their big houses, and before you know it, this happens to all the great bands. They're like, oh, I'm taking this for granted now. It's here. I mean, we can't put a foot wrong, and really, I want to do my own stuff. And I want to do my own stuff. And George Harris is in the back goes, well, I write some songs. You know, you always ignore my songs. Yeah, they're good songs. But and you could see that all of that thing that destroys every band in the end. The only time this doesn't happen is when the talent of the band is intrinsically in the band. Think of U2, right? The Edge is not a brilliant guitarist. Bono is a great frontman, but for U2, nobody wants to buy a solo album by them. And if they considered it, they worked their way through it, and that's why they're still here. But with the Beatles, they end up wanting to do their own thing, and they spend 3 years from 67 to 1970 trying to do their own thing. And that is personified by Maxwell's Silver Hammer, which I believe if you just took off that album, would turn this into one of the greatest albums ever made, which we would just trot out along with the list, because you don't. People go for Sgt. Pepper, and Sgt. Pepper is a brilliant album, and then people think they're clever come and say, oh, it's not that good, blah, blah, blah. It is. It absolutely is. But Abbey Road is ruined by this. I think I've got to the end of this video. Obviously, I'm hoping Rob will come through the door. He's not going to. People always arrive unannounced when I don't want them. When I want them, they don't. That's life, innit? Right, we're done. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, stick a like on it. If you want to see some more, you can subscribe to the channel. Please subscribe. Coming up to 50,000. At the time of filming this video, when I checked this morning, I'm 600 away from 50,000. And that means I'm now halfway through to 100,000. And when I get to 100,000, I tell you, it's going to be something special. When I get to 100,000, I see that that's going to be my Abbey Road. That's the point where I go, right, this career I've had in music that's led me through this long winding road, through all the things that I've done. And if you're making a film of my life, which nobody will want to ever do, but if they ever do, I want the peak of it will be that day when I go to 100,000 subscribers. I don't want it going past that, and when I go all downhill because I'm too old and my memory starts going. Don't want that bit to be shown. I'm still here desperately doing videos, and my fan base that have slowly died off because they're all older than me. But the few are hanging on, and they're just like, oh, Andy now. I mean, he always used to forget stuff, but now it's just a whole video of him coming on and going, yeah. What was that band? You know the ones. Lead singer. Bulgy trousers, blonde hair, fuzzy blonde hair. What were they? Oh, bloody hell. They did a few albums. I remember buying them, yeah. You know, once I've got to that point, I don't want that to be featured in the biopic of my life. I mean, if they could make a film about Bob Dylan going electric, I mean, Bob Dylan's important in the history of rock and roll, right? It's really important. But the idea that he gets up and pulls an electric guitar out and then some bloke calls him Judas is enough to make a whole bloody film on, as though it's that important. It's not. It's important, but the thing in itself, it's not filmic. It's not filmic to do that. You know, what's his name? Pete Seeger looking for an axe so he can chop the cable, which never happened. So they've had to. I mean, that's not that exciting. I'll tell you, it's not that exciting. If you were to do a biopic of my life, I'd have much more interesting things in mind, like falling into the penguin pit in bloody Dudley Zoo, for example. I mean, Dylan doesn't fall into any penguin pits. I have. All sorts of manner of business I've gone through in my life, all sorts of trials and tribulations. But at the end of it all, just at the point where I thought my career was over and I was just an old bloke with a big record collection and dodgy hands who can't drum anymore, I get to 100,000 views. So this is imploring you. I'm not going to talk about Patreon and all the other ways of supporting me. If you have got to the end of this video and you're still watching and you haven't subscribed, just hit subscribe. Even if you hate me, please just hit subscribe, because I promise if you hate me, once I get to that 100,000, I'm going to pull back. You won't have to put up with all this rubbish, and I'll spend more time on the videos. I'll go to one a week, or maybe one every 2 weeks, and there'll be proper videos where I'll be able to do some proper research. And now Rob has arrived, and I know Rob's been all the way through this video. I've been saying, I hope Rob arrives. Come over here, Rob. We'll finish off with Rob. Come over here. Right, I've just done. Here's Rob Groken, ladies and gentlemen. Round of applause. Rob Groken's just arrived, just exactly the right time as we're coming in, because I got OCD. I like it to stop on the hour. We've got 4 minutes.
Oh, okay.
So I've just done brilliant albums, great albums that have one awful track on it.
Right, yeah.
The Beatles, Abbey Road, Maxwell's Silver Hammer. I think that track, and it's not terrible. I've argued it's not terrible, but it just does not have the joy of Yellow Submarine.
No.
And I think we could easily go, most people would go, oh, Abbey Road's their greatest album. And we sort of do, but my thesis is on this video that we don't, because of Maxwell's Silver Hammer.
Yeah, I think if you take it on its own, then yeah, it's an odd one that doesn't, like you say, like Yellow Submarine on its own, it's a fun song, but Maxwell Silverhammer is odd. In the context of the whole album, it sort of helps flow a little bit.
So there's a counter argument. You see, I offer it to the public.
See, because you've got, the whole medley, you've got the whole thing where you've got Polythene Pam and you've got,
At least you've come up with another track.
Yeah. But
Golden Slumbers.
Golden Slumbers, and there's a way that they flow through. But Maxwell Silverhammer isn't one of the ones that you go like, oh yeah, I love that album.
But don't you think Folklore, right, it represents everything that was wrong with the Beatles? And although they went back in and created this incredible album at the end, Maxwell Silverhammer stands there as testament to the fact that the Beatles didn't want to be together at that point, really.
Oh,
and bossy Paul McCartney was just keeping them together.
Yeah, he got his way on that. Yeah, because that's his sort of... He's
right
sort of... Without
John Lennon called it granny music. I did a bit of research. I do a bit of research. Rob will tell you, I don't know this much about the Beatles normally, but I've been reading up on it. Apparently,
you've researched for a video.
I tell you what's getting bad with my videos is there's a certain band and I go, I know all about them. I don't need to research. Yeah. Whereas here, I could actually talk quite eloquently about the Beatles, because I know enough and I've just researched it, and there's all these little things that you start to pick up. The fact that Lennon had a car crash. I've said all this. I'm just telling Robbie. I mean, you can watch the video. Should we just finish up?
Do you know what's funny?
Yeah, go on.
Do you know what's funny? Is the T-shirt I've been wearing as well is literally...
Come on, this is out.
It is an Abbey Road Star Wars crossover thing. That was not planned. I did not know you were doing... You know
the nerdy prog end of the market. Watch my videos. They've sat through this. Oh, it's quite a good video. I quite like that. It's all right. That was. And then you come and show that, and they go, "Oh, one of the best videos Andy's ever made." That bloody T-shirt.
Yeah, they'll either love or hate it.
It'll be up on YouTube soon. I'll have it as merchandise. I'll buy myself 10. I'm going to sell them £100 each.
You need to have like yourself walking across
That's
like
like
4 different versions of yourself.
You know, Frost have done this for the marketing
right.
for their last album, they're pushed in like
Shopping trolleys or something.
lawnmowers and stuff. And so Frost has done
You
this.
need to avoid that. Though.
Yeah, and so as we get to the end of the video, and Rob's come in, that's interesting. So you think it does work in the?
I think it works in the context of the album, but I agree that on its own, it's an odd one. But then I think if you took Polythene Pam out on its own, that's an odd one.
That's what I was going to tell you. The thing that surprised me is how long do you think they spent on the studio in it? You know that they didn't want to do it, and Paul McCartney says we've got to work on. How long do you think they spent on that song in the studio?
No, I don't. Well, it's a Paul McCartney one, isn't it? I think he's just sat there going, "Oh, I'll do this now," and then we do this now,
and they're all getting fed
and
up.
John's just like,
Yeah. So how long did they actually spend on it?
I actually don't. I wouldn't.
Guess. Just
Like 3 hours.
No, they spent 3 days on it.
3 days.
3 days on it, which I thought was really short.
On the one song.
Yeah.
Wow.
See, I think that is really short. Rob thinks it's really long. This is the problem with these videos. As soon as you bring somebody else in, they have a different opinion to me, and you get a different view. But I have tried to offer it. I'll have to get you on. I mean, because obviously Rob hates me mentioning this, but of course Rob's dad was the bass player in ELO,
yeah.
right? So if you want to know what the reason why it's that is the only reason why I have him on the channel.
Only reason you're friends with me.
Yeah, but the point is, ELO is a band I know absolutely nothing about, and Rob, we keep saying we're going to do it, aren't we? Where you're going to do rank the albums, and then I'll just ask questions like somebody who doesn't know anything about ELO.
Yeah, but you need to listen. You should listen to them.
But I'd have to listen to them.
Yeah, you'd have to listen to them. Well, just once. I mean, okay,
it's
there's
Time.
a lot of albums.
I bought Time in 1982 and it put me off them forever.
That's the worst one to get in. But, actually, I haven't said that. I think...
What's the worst one?
The worst one?
Yeah. And are you going to class ELO 2 albums
I'm going to... No. I'll have to say...
It's that one off the Time,
it's the end one. Balance of Power, because that was the one when he just got rid of everybody.
Those of you who stayed to the end, shall we get Rob on? If you want to get the definitive ELO ranking with somebody who actually really knows it from the inside, then say it in the comments.
No pressure.
And then if Rob will have to do it, because I keep saying it to him, but it's his father's legacy, so he treats it. I don't care about his father's legacy, but he does, you see, so he wants to do it justice. And there's a lot of people in there, and the ELO fans will look at it, won't they? And they'll be going, "Oh, Rob said he doesn't like the album that your dad's not on." Yeah, that's what you're worried about, isn't it?
That'll cause some. It'll be fun. Whatever.
Bye, everybody. See you soon.
Bye.